Okay, so David, why don't you just start out by introducing yourself?
My name is David Russell, and I'm presently with the Toronto Police Service. I've been a police officer now. March will be the end of my 33rd year, and I spent a couple years, well, a couple summers, I should say, as a civilian in my hometown of Stratford. They have a like a park security, if you will, undercover, funny enough,
Mhm.
where you go around in plain clothes and just kind of squeal on bad people. And yeah, the police will come and ticket them or arrest them as needed.
So
Um,
this was when you were what, like a teenager? Is this what sparked your interest in
uh,
policing?
yeah, so I was my last year of high school to college.
Hmm.
I found that was an available thing for a summer job, and then I came back the next year after that and continued on the next summer. So it was actually kind of a lot of fun, and it was quite an experience because you're actually, I mean, nowadays they use cell phones, obviously, but back in those days you had an actual police radio with you.
Mm.
So you had this big cumbersome big metal hunk of metal with a big antenna that was at least a foot long. So you had to somehow carry that around in a backpack all the time. But
Yeah,
but it was,
and
yeah, it was a lot
somehow
of fun.
remain inconspicuous.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So after that, I applied to a few police departments, but um, I I started in Peel,
Hmm.
and I did my first 15 years in Peel,
Hmm.
and then after there, I was driving at the time all the way from Whitby, and it got
Wow.
pretty trying on my body and drive and so on, and so I ended up transferring to Toronto after 15 years, and I've been in Toronto ever since. So.
Okay, so bring me back then to the beginning of those 15 years in Peel. What did you like your security job aside, what was it that sparked your interest in policing, and what was your understanding of the role of a police officer 33 years ago?
Yeah, so back in the beginning, this would be like the late 80s. This is when there was yellow police cars, which a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
I drove in a yellow police car, one of the last few that they had in Peel. But yeah, I've always wanted to help people. I've had growing up, I had good experiences with the police, and good experiences in the fact that um, I had a alcoholic father who was very abusive, and he was sadly, I guess, if you'd say, was arrested several times, or hopefully, gladly was arrested several times. So I saw the police, even though as a role they were arresting my dad, they were also kind of defending my mom and family and stuff. And so, being it's such a, I was outside of Stratford actually, so I actually went to school with one of the police officers' sons,
Oh.
um, and we it was kind of awkward, I guess some would think, but it's being a small town, it was you'd have to kind of get along,
Mm-hmm.
and I never viewed the police really in general as being uh, nothing but a community kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's different, over the years, and also depending on where you are. But I was in a small town
Mm-hmm.
outside Stratford, so I grew up, around horses and farms and stuff. So it wasn't really the kind of view as, I guess, typical police officers would be in the inner city.
Mm-hmm.
But my grandfather was kind of the male role model that raised me. My mom's dad and mom, and my mom too. But he was in the Air Force, and of course I wanted to follow in his footsteps. But these eyes of mine were not that good, so
Mm-hmm.
I fell into it, kind of, I guess, as a secondary kind of role. But at the same time, I really wanted to be helping people, and I saw what kind of a direct correlation, I guess, with helping people. You can work anywhere in the world, but at least in policing, you're directly affecting someone in their lives and stuff. And that always stuck with me,
Mm-hmm.
being the community type of police officer as opposed to, the enforcer of rules and laws and stuff. I've always taken that approach through my career with not just people you deal with, but also with other officers, right? So, I've always viewed that we're all on the same team, not just police, but the community and citizens as well and stuff. So,
And when you
so
say
that's kind of
you've
what
had
brought me into
that view with
policing.
other officers, do you mean that this is something like a view that you would impart on other officers that maybe
Absolutely.
have
Yep.
different views?
Yeah, I've always appreciated teaching. I've always been, I'm a chatty Cathy. I can talk a lot, and this interview may be 7 hours long, but no, I think I do like being able to explain uh, to people why things are being done. I do like in teaching and imparting things. That's what got me into. If I wasn't a police officer, I'd be teaching for sure. And I kind of got the best of both worlds because, I do coach basketball and have done so since 1992. So it's been 30 years.
So
And,
wait. So let's get into that, because that is not a separate thing entirely. You got into the basketball coaching because of your role as a police officer, right? You were, if I remember correctly from our previous conversations, you were earlier in your career, you were placed as a school resource officer, one of the first school resource officers in Ontario, into this high school in Peel. And how did you get into the coaching role when you were there?
Yeah, that's right. And I found out since our conversation that I thought I was the first wave, but I found out I was the second wave.
Okay.
So
Still,
I did
I would
find out.
say still one of the first, considering how many years that was in effect.
Yeah, this is back like early 90s. So I was at the school, and of course, this was brand new. So they gave me that one course of presentation, which was actually held by a civilian, not even associated with the police department. It was just some group we went to as a bank. I think it was a bank actually we went to, and it was
Really?
just we have these police officers here that are going to learn how to do presentations.
Ah,
So,
okay.
yeah, it was totally new, obviously for a lot of people, and so it wasn't really related to kind of presenting policing issues, but it was a lot of fun. Like the kids that the school I was at was in Mississauga, obviously the South End, and a lot of good kids. I've got a lot of good bonds that I've had now for over 30 years there. And the usual questions that children and kids will ask, trying to be funny, and teenagers, you got to kind of arm yourself with, as it were. And humor's always been a friend of mine. So I try to use humor either at the expense of myself or not the expense of anybody else, though, I guess is the best way, right? So
You showed up at this high school and you realized like they gave you this office, and your office, was it in the gym, or you were using the gym teacher's office or something? Was that it?
yeah, we didn't have an office like I guess nowadays they do, but I actually shared the phys ed office with the other guys there, and there was there still is a boys side and girls side, and so on the boys side it was quite funny because I was looking out the gym, well, the first or second day I was there, and I saw the kids practicing basketball, and they had a really good team. And I know basketball pretty good, but I saw these guys playing, and one of the fellows was an amazing player. He's a corrections officer now, actually, and he became a Peel All-Star and an Ontario All-Star. He was a very good player, and there was no one there. So I went out and was shooting baskets with him because I'm 23, right? So I'm a young fellow at the time, and we started talking and realized that they didn't have a coach. So I said, well, I'm at the school. I'm working Monday to Friday. I got no family, no kids. I'm a young fella. I'll do it. I'll coach. Absolutely. I'll coach with you guys. So that started that kind of bond. And I've been at that school ever since. I've coached some other schools in the interim from time to time, even in Scarborough, and some rep teams. But I've kind of always stayed at the same school to the point now where the whole program is a midget, junior, senior level. I got all my coaches there are previous players of mine. Some of them are teachers at the school. There's police officers that are now, on the police department, both in Peel and Toronto, that were, students of mine, and corrections officers. And there's a lawyer. There's one that went to the dark side. Yeah. So, and it's funny because he's a criminal lawyer, so it's become a conflict sometimes where he's representing someone.
Oh, interesting.
And, yeah, so it's that's been kind of interesting over the years, but
So you've been
yeah, so a lot of
coaching at
fun.
this school, like at this school for the most part in Mississauga for 30 years. You said earlier in the conversation that you had been one of the reasons you moved to Toronto Police is because the commute was too hard from Whitby, but you still live in Durham region and you are commuting to coach this. Like what keeps you going back to coaching every season at this Mississauga high school?
I gotta say, it's like a second family for me.
Mm.
I have seriously attempted to coach east here
Mhm.
near me, which I've been able to do. Um, but it's really hard when you have such a great, like, there's one teacher, he's been there for 20 years.
Wow.
It's hard to leave that kind of family.
Mhm.
Now it's at the point like where my son and daughter, my daughter's just new to it because she's only 4,
Mm.
but my son, he loves going there. He's into basketball now himself,
Mm.
and he loves going there, and the kids love him. You know what I really like about it is the fact that the I say kids, but I mean these young men that
Mhm.
I'm coaching, growing into being young men, it gives them a chance to kind of hang out with a younger kid. A lot of
Mm.
them do have younger siblings, but it's kind of funny because they kind of treat him like a bit of gold. You know what I mean? Because it's the
Mm.
coach's son,
Mm.
so we've got to make sure that we we do good by him, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
So,
Your
but they
son
are
must
really
just
good
love
kids.
that.
He loves it, and the kids love him. And I've been there. We went to the finals a few years ago. We're tier two. We're a tier
Yep.
two team, and we went to a finals a couple times now. We've been to the finals, and it's great to have them there because the kids think them as kind of they're some kids get superstitious, so we got to have your son touch the ball before we play, kind of thing, right? So I've got
Nice.
some great shots of them sitting in the middle, holding him up, and they got the
Oh,
hands on the ball and stuff. It's a lot of fun. So
that's really
yeah,
nice. Okay, so from what I recall from again one of our previous conversations, you said that falling into that school resource officer program or whatever it was called back in the early 90s, it was kind of unexpected for you that
yeah.
you had enjoyed being on the road. So you were only in that SRO program for what was it, a year or so? Even
That's
though
right. So this they call it SLO. I think it was a school liaison officer. I
Oh,
think they
okay,
call it.
yeah, yeah,
They always change these acronyms all the time in policing, right?
yeah.
So, but yeah, I like being on the road. And then I forget who came to me first, but I know it ended up being a sergeant at some point in time said, we would really like to have someone young at
Hmm.
that time to be in this kind of program because we don't want to have an old crotchety guy or
Hmm.
gal, dealing with kids. And you like to talk a lot. So that seemed to be kind of my forte into it. And then it's funny because ever since then, there was obviously officers after that became the school resource officers for that school.
Mm.
And it was always like, we've already talked to Dave. He's already, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Coach Dave is taking care of everything. So you don't need, so whoever was working that school, they really didn't have to worry about anything going,
Wow,
you know what I mean? Like,
they had it
cause
pretty easy.
I arrested a guy with a handgun one time, a
Wow.
real handgun he brought to the school, and I called up the police to get there quickly, and I kept an eye
Mm.
on him.
How
And
did that
then,
come about?
so again, funny enough, one of my previous players who he was actually a student teacher at the time.
Mm.
So he was doing his, how they do a time
Like an
in the school,
internship? Yep.
internship in the schools that were. So he was lucky enough to get the same school again. And
Mm.
so he said to me, he says, Coach, he's really quietly, and this is a tournament that's going on.
Oh,
There's a lot
wow.
of schools there, a lot of kids. I think this guy's got a gun, and he's showing it to his other, players and stuff. And so I kept an eye on where he was, and I got up higher in a position higher on the bleachers, and was kind of keeping an eye. And myself and this other fellow was, and he brought it out, and we saw it. It was a real handgun, and
Mm.
I don't know what he was doing it for. Who knows?
Mhm.
They had a good team, so there was no question of whether they were losing for some reason.
Mhm.
But it was a really sad state, so we
Mhm.
called the police, and then I had one of the other fellas, hold the door open to the gym, and then we grabbed him right away. As soon as they came in, you could see him, look up, obviously, and all his, schoolmates, his players mates are beside him. But we grabbed onto both his arms and took him down to the ground. And
Mm.
I mean, the guy that did it with me, still a school teacher.
Oh.
But it was kind of it was tense for a minute. But yeah, the police all came in and it was good. But I mean, that's the kind of thing going on in the school that you just never thought. I mean, he might have done that and walked away. We never would have known.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact he was showing it to people and stuff, and it turned out to be a real handgun. It was a 9mm handgun. So,
Jeez.
you know, this is a 15-year-old kid, right? So,
Ah, that's sad.
but yeah, there's always been, it's my experiences have been really good with, you know, basketball. I know over the years when I talk to the young boys and girls while I'm working, they'll tell me they go to whatever school it is, and I'll know kind of a reputation of what the school's like through basketball, right? So that's kind of where, and I tell them, you know, freely. I always say like, hey, you know, I coach basketball, so I certainly know your school because of whatever. And it always impresses them because they go, wow, you know, like he knows our school record and the players that went there and so on and so forth, right? So,
and that's
it's
when
always,
you're talking to them in your police uniform.
yeah, so it's always been a good plus for me, right? Is to be able
Yeah.
to talk either basketball or talk shoes or something like that.
Do you like on that note, like have you found some other officers that I've spoken to, many of them have talked about like the barrier that the uniform can create for some people, that some people will just look at you, see your uniform and just automatically, you know, I don't like you because you're a police officer. Is this something
Yeah,
that you experienced a lot throughout your career?
absolutely. That's something that's always there. It's always kind of it always is and can be an issue. And some people you can't ever that can never be gone. Um, and you know, to another side of the thing, over the years, I've seen this same thing happen on the other side of things. Like you make an assumption. You see, no matter what it is, like one of the ones that always surprised me was this. We were. Oh, this is so many years ago, but there's a guy training me. He's a traffic officer. And he was training me with this new. They'd switched over to a laser radar now. This is how long ago it was because we used to use this MDR, I think it was called, and so we're changing to a laser one. So he was training me, and we had this car fly by us, a sports kind of car too, and was like just way over the speed limit. And we chased the car down and everything, and pulled her over. The lady was 84 years old.
No.
An 84-year-old lady, and she had I don't know what was going on. I mean, I didn't deal with it directly because the traffic guy did, but because I mean, they get excited when they get someone like that. This is a big deal for them, right? So,
Yeah, no kidding.
but yeah, she was 84 years old at the time, and she was driving kind of a semi-sports car, and she just had no way about it. She was very sharp. She was very, but there's an assumption there, right? You see the sports car, and okay, it's going to be some young guy or
Yeah.
You know, the type of thing, right? So it was 82 or 84. I can't remember. She was over 80. I remember that. So it was like, oh my gosh, this is before they had the suspensions and you know what I mean? You could do a part 3. That was it. There was no racing or any of that type of thing, right? It was long ago.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, you're right. There is that kind of, and sometimes you're able to kind of reach those people. But I find that in order to kind of get that wall down, there is, if you will, from the uniform, it does take time. And in PRU, so you know, the primary response unit,
yeah,
that's not really afforded sometimes. But being me, the chatty guy, once the dust is settled, if you will, so if you make an arrest or you're dealing with something that's an emergent situation, it's nice if you can have the time to talk to the people that are there, not necessarily people that maybe you've dealt with directly, which sometimes can happen. But there's a lot of people kind of, I noticed, especially over the years, that it's kind of built up where the police came, they did their thing, they left. What happened? And so there's a lot of people that are always wondering. I know over the years, early on especially, I was kind of chastised for kind of talking to people afterwards. I never saw the big mystery in it, to be honest. I came from the military prior, so when I came to policing, it was a bit more loosey-goosey, I guess is a word, in regards to how you carried yourself in deportment and stuff. So, but I never really saw the harm. And I guess this is like, I laughed when I saw this old movie, which I'm definitely dating myself, but Crocodile Dundee, when he shows up in New York and he's saying hi to everybody. That's the kind of thing that I can really relate to when I first came from, you know, out in the country into Toronto. But I found, you know, Mississauga is, I'm going to include that GTA, I find that people always had these questions, and sometimes, hey, if I've had the time to be able to do it and explain, I would try to. I've been successful sometimes because I know for a fact that some people just don't want to listen no matter what, so you're never going to get to them. But there is a lot of people, I think, that need to have an education of some kind. And when I say education, I mean, given some knowledge of some kind as to why something has happened or whatever. They may not like it or whatever, but there is certain rules of engagement, as it were, that we have to abide by. And those are things that are not just arbitrarily decided, right? So you can pick anything. It doesn't matter, A, B, or C. There's always going to be somewhere along the line, there's going to be a rule for if person does A, this is what we've learned over years of experience that you will respond with. And that can be from other people's experiences, but it can be from personal experiences as well. So whether doesn't matter what it is, right? So I'm just saying whether it could be an emergency situation or otherwise, but you learn through human nature as to kind of what works and doesn't work. And you learn very quickly the people that have social skills to be able to deal with it are obviously going to succeed much better than introvert people that just don't know how to explain themselves and so on. And there is an acting aspect to this too. I might add that when you have a uniform on, and I've done this my whole life, you do act a certain way differently. And years I thought of and this kind of transcended into basketball. So my school that I coach at is not a private school, and they're not Catholic, so they don't wear uniforms. So on basketball days, game days, I should say, I've always made the kids wear a shirt and tie. They can wear their jersey over top if they want to show school spirit or team spirit, but they got to wear a shirt and tie. And immediately you'll see that day that they're wearing that, they act a certain way. They certainly don't get in trouble, and the girls look at them differently, right? Or guys and girls, right? So the same thing, right? So they get treated differently, and they themselves treat themselves a bit different that day too. So it's kind of a little bit of a nice lesson for them as well. It's not lost on me that, I am a male role model for a lot of these guys. And over the years, this has come about. I did do a radio program, like a show there a few years ago with one of the kids that was going to be joining a gang. And it was the day that I had kept him on the team. And that's what kept him walking away from going into a gang. He was going to be brought into the gang that same night, but he had a practice and it was a tryout. So, I won't mention his last name. His name is Danny, and he was from another country. And Danny changed his life, and he became an engineer through McMaster. It was amazing. It was nice to hear because he contacted me after years and said, I'd like to, the radio has asked him to do this show.
Wow.
And you're one of the people that have done changes for me because his dad had been lost. His dad had been killed when he was younger. So it was only his brother, him and his mom. And so it was nice to hear. It was very heartfelt.
Did you have any idea at the time that he was so close to going down that wrong path?
Not at all, because this was a good-hearted kid, right? He was the last player I picked on the team. I always try to keep good people on my team. I would rather have some really good kids as opposed to really great players sometimes, because there's amazing players, but if they can't follow rules, like you're in school to get an education. You're not in school to play basketball. I can't affect that. I hold all the cards when it comes to you playing basketball. I tell this to all the parents I've been meeting with before at the beginning of the year. If your child, if you're wondering about basketball, what's going to happen? We have there's always a mandatory Friday practice. No matter what, when the season starts, Friday evening, you know where your son's going to be. They're going to be at the school practicing. They're not going to be at the mall wandering around. But I tell them the rules at the beginning of the season. And one of the rules is, you treat others nicely. You make sure you stay together, want to help each other for homework and so on and so forth. I'm not in the school and I'm not a teacher. I can, however, it's not a democracy when it comes to me, because I hold all the rules, or the coaches do. So if you want to play on my basketball team, you have to go to school. So you have to attend it. Once you have a bad attendance, And basketball, the other thing is too, which people may not realize, is the longest running season of any sport in school.
Hmm.
So for basketball, the regular basketball runs from say November until March.
Mm-hmm.
But I start mine in September. So they
Mm.
start with cross country running.
Mm.
So I've got the luxury of having one of my players is a coach as well, Max players, and he coaches cross country running. Now they
Mm.
don't have to compete if they don't want to, but they got to do cross country running because that's conditioning,
Mm.
right? But they must attend school. So they may not be getting great marks. I can't control that, but they're going to be in class.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not, they don't play. If
Mm-hmm.
they skip out, they still come to practice. I make them come to practice still. If they're trying to skip out on, say the first period or
Mm-hmm.
something, they still come to practice, but they don't play. They sit
Mm-hmm.
in the bleachers and they got to listen.
Mm-hmm.
How exciting is that? Boring, right? But it's that next step for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's building time. And if they're not practicing where they're actually out on the floor practicing, well then they're not going to be playing.
Mm-hmm.
So I hold all those cards. If a young uh, you know uh, student really wants to play in the basketball team, I hold a lot of power in that regard, right? I don't abuse it in any way, but
Mm-hmm.
I let the parents know that they may do a lot of things that you're never going to be able to get them to do, like clean the room or something,
Mm-hmm.
because I'll ask them to do these little things, right? So, but it's good to have a male role model, you know what I mean,
Mm-hmm.
for anybody. You need to have, that old saying, you need to have abilities to raise a family, but there's a lot of that aspect to it, and I do see that.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much when we're doing regular practice and stuff, but when we get into tournaments and we're going away, we're staying overnight somewhere, because now you see the kids kind of let their hair down a bit. I used to be able to let mine down, um, but then you get to really know the kids, right? You talk to
Mm-hmm.
them over dinner
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that, right? And you see they're bantering back and forth, and you see the little they're fun times, right? So these are kids that are growing up in Mississauga, Toronto, and we're going to tournaments that are up north somewhere. So there's lots of snow, there's snowmobiles they've never seen, I'm sure. There's skiing, there's all kinds of things that animals and stuff they've never seen. A lot of these kids never seen a cow before.
Wow.
So it's amazing to take these kids up to that place like that. So I have a lot of fun with that anyways.
I
That's my second life. That's why I go back to Port Credit I go back to the Mississauga all the time,
Mississauga all the time.
because yeah, because it's a long drive, but I love that's my family I love over there too, right?
I
So
wonder, like,
yeah.
just hearing you talk about the importance of having a role model and it taking a village. I wonder if you see yourself in those kids and if that's something that's drawn you back, just given what you said earlier about how your grandfather was your male role model. You didn't have the best situation with your dad at home, but you had your
Yeah,
grandfather, you had your grandmother, your mother, obviously, like this little village helping raise you, and you ended up on
yeah,
a great track. Do you think that's part of what keeps you going back to those kids?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And they get I've had some emotional retirements
Hmm.
from the school, and
Because you keep trying to leave. Oh,
a
you mean
couple.
other people retiring from the school? Yes.
Well, no, me myself tried to retire.
Oh,
Um,
right. Yeah.
and yeah, well, that's funny too, because there's been teachers there, like most teachers, there have been a lot less than, well, every teacher now in the school now has been there lots less than I have.
Wow.
Right. So that's a running joke. I got my own little pigeonhole in the office, and everyone always looks every night, who is this guy again? I never see this guy. But no, but it's tough because we finish our school season, basketball season in March, sometimes earlier than others. But
Mm,
then what happens is, I for years have always put in um, the same team, so that senior team, if you will, like
mhm,
that have graduated. Um, I put them into a summer league, so we've had a U of T Summers League for at least 15 years,
mm,
and so now we've got a bridging of kids that are gone to college and university. They come back for the summer. We've got new kids that are now in their senior year of high school. So we get that bridge not only of 2 or 3 seasons, but we get 5 or 6 years. I've had kids now that have been know each other for 10 or 12 years,
mm,
and yet they didn't play in the same team except in the summer league, right?
mhm,
So it's such a long time with them, you know what I mean? And you
mm,
invest so much time with them. So I mean, my last wedding was one of the players I coached my very first year
mm.
was one of my groomsmen,
Wow.
right? So yeah, so that's the great bond I've had with them. It's really hard to leave them because the summertime rolls around, I'm having a ball again,
Mhm,
uh, and then I get I get sucked back again in September. In September, but I got my kids now. I can't keep doing it. I know I can't. It's just, yeah, it's just
But
my
now your
son
kids
is
love it so much.
right. I know this is it. This is the thing. It's
What do
my
you
son
do?
wants to go all the time. I
You
know.
shouldn't
I
have
know.
brought him. You shouldn't have made him the lucky charm, you know? Okay, so you know what I'm thinking about too is I recently had a conversation with somebody who is, I think you could probably classify this person as being in the anti-police camp and just saying, you know, we need, you know, defund the police need an overhaul, all this stuff. And I was saying, like, listen, like, I get what you're saying, but I don't agree with it. I truly think that the vast majority of police officers are doing the job because they want to make a positive impact in this world. And this person said something like, oh, well, if you're talking about like, the neighborhood officers, they always talk about the neighborhood officers. And indeed, I've spoken with some neighborhood officers on this, but you've never been, you know, aside from that short stint as that school officer, you've never been in a role like that. Most people have never seen your face publicly as a police officer. Like you went from that to you went back to the road, right? And then what else have you done in your career? Just to give people an idea of how, you know, that's not your role as a police officer to be this role model.
No, you know what, I will say, you know what, policing, I was very blessed with my career. My career was a lot of ups and downs. I stayed as a constable. I was on the promotion list, on the short list for a period of time that I didn't go to because there's a few reasons, personal reasons, but one kind of contributing factor was the fact that once you bump up, okay, financially it's great. You do get, you know, a bit more money for your pension, but you limited your space as to where you can go. And that was part of a factor. I mean, I had another personal reason for it, which is bigger than that, but that was part of a factor I looked at, was the fact that now your places you're going to be going to is pretty limited. But yeah, for me, let's see, I was back out. They didn't call it PRU then. I can't even remember what they called it now, but
But you were responding
um,
to
I
911
went from,
calls.
but exactly, right. So, and then I went to the fraud bureau for a bit, again, with my talking aspect with people. I met someone that had some really, really, really good quality fraudulent bills, and it was American money. And through that became a JFO, which is a Joint Forces operation. And this person would only deal with me. They only trusted me. So you just mentioned a minute ago about someone that was quite anti-police. This person here was along the same line. They've been screwed over by other officers. And so I'm not sure how it works nowadays, but back in the day, you could get money for information, and it was, you know, acting as an agent and stuff like that. Without going into big details here, this person had been screwed over by that, and it became an investigation. Without going off on a tangerine here, but it became an issue where it became an investigation itself, and that those officers dealing with that, unrelated to me, ended up getting investigated for corruption and stuff, because they weren't passing off the money to this person. The long and short of it is they didn't trust anyone but me. And so that kind of got me a foot into working, of all places, the fraud bureau. And when I heard that, you know, they're transferring me to the fraud bureau, you know, my vision of the fraud bureau was, you know, probably not changed, you know, from what it is nowadays. It's different. But for me, it was for a project. So on paper, I was in the fraud bureau because it was counterfeit money. But it ended up being quite a large investigation, involved Buffalo, ATF, and all these different organizations. So it was quite amazing. And then from the fraud bureau, that was a pretty short stint, I guess. It was a few months, and then went from there to back to PRU again. I went. It's a long story, but I went to the Marine for one day, and it was nothing I did wrong. I had been, so my staff sergeant at the time, who really liked me, had gone on vacation, and the usual old guy took 8 weeks off the summer, right? Took all of July and August off. And so this opening came up from the Marine unit. Now he was a micromanager. And so it was an acting staff. It was a sergeant that I applied through and stuff like that. And this is way back in the day when your cell phones were big bricks, you know, like this. So no one had them type of thing. And I got a spot. And the day that I went down to the Marine unit, I was the day that he'd come back from vacation. And rather than congratulating me, this goes to show you how people can be. He brought me back to the platoon, and he refused my transfer because he had connections and higher up.
Oh, that must have been painful making your way back, assuming that you really wanted to be in the Marine unit. It's a cool posting.
Yeah. So anyways, it was one of the few places too that I was going to enjoy. I've been on boats all my life, but I was really looking forward to the fact that I didn't need to be first class at the time, even though I had just gotten first class, I think, but you could go there at second class at the time. But I just wanted to change and, you know, and just, I want to explore the world of policing.
For anybody that doesn't follow policing, you're referring to first class constable versus second class constable, which is the ranking structure. Exactly. When you're starting out.
First class is your top.
Yeah,
that's right. That's your top.
Exactly.
So, anyways, so I was brought back, and I wasn't none too happy, but I had a choice to make right then. I could like freak out and be upset. But instead I chose to just speak to him. He was a much older guy than me. And it kind of being that military background that I did have, I was able to kind of contain myself. And I had a talk with him, and I sat down with the other sergeant at the time that had approved me. And we had a good conversation. And in the end, he was agreeing to disagree because he wanted to keep good people on his platoon. But I understood why, and I appreciated that. But we both agreed to disagree. And basically, I just kind of waited my time.
You're just too darn likable, Constable David Russell.
I don't know what it was. He liked to have young people on the ship, right? Because we're hard workers. So this is when there was a lot of young guys there. So young guys and gals. So he did like to have young officers that were, you know, go-getters, right? So we had good numbers. So anyways, so yeah, I went to PRU, back to that for that. And then this, you know, came about with a student, not a student that I directly was involved with, but a friend of them, and had contacted me back in the day when there was pagers. I got in a page early morning. I was on day shift to say, you got it, coach, you got to read the front news of the newspaper because you'll see what I mean. And I looked, and there was a murder that had happened in Mississauga. And this other student was waiting to surrender themselves to me. Again, not to toot my own horn, but I mean, I think that they felt that they had a little bit of a father figure there. Well, I do know that. So it was a boy and girl that had killed a jogger out for a jog in the middle of the night. So he surrendered himself. So I went in the homicide bureau after that for a while. Again, it was just a temporary transfer. I wasn't in the homicide bureau, as it were, but we did interviews and worked long hours. Brought a little bit of fun into the unit, I think, a little bit, because you know, back then they were pretty stiff, I think. And then fast forward a couple of years, went back to PRU again, and then the officer in charge of that case, court was coming up, and had gotten sick with cancer, and they thought it might have been terminal. Thankfully, it turned out not to be. They recovered fine, which was great, but there was no one that was available. And this is where it comes to be the low person on the totem pole, because everyone else that was on that case had moved on to other units, whether it's detective officer, been promoted or whatever. So here I was, the lowly PC, but I had a lot of knowledge for the case. So I was punted into the court case. So with no experience, having just done a training in CIB, I was basically OIC of the actual court proceedings.
Sitting next to the Crown Attorney in the courtroom.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And like 20 something years old. And again, something else happened unrelated to that, but that court case ended up getting put off again. So something happened with a particular lawyer there and one of the accused. And so it was only a few days. And then it was put off for another, I was like 14 months or something. So then by that time, the person was back, and I only had to go in as a witness. So it got dealt away. But funny enough, fast forward a few years now. So now I'm working in Scarborough in Toronto. And my partner that I'm working with, I'm in the major crime unit at the time. And he says to me, he's got some paperwork to serve on this inmate that's at the East detention. So
how many
we
years
went to
after are we talking since you arrested the acquaintance or friend of the guy you knew from the
12,
12
I
years?
think 12 or 13 years now.
Okay.
Because it would be, yeah, about 12 years.
Okay.
And so at the time he was like 16, 17, right?
The
Clean
person that
cut,
you surrendered himself to you.
accused,
Yeah.
accused, yeah, you were right. So, clean cut, real typical looking teenage kid, right? Like, like no tats or anything like that. 12 years later, he's got a child of his own. He's been incarcerated the entire time. So conjugal visits, I guess, are
Wow.
okay. But covered in tats from here all the way down his whole body.
Wow.
And I look at the name and it's a very distinctive name. And I was like, I think I know this guy. It was, oh, you wouldn't know him. And he doesn't know I worked for Peel before, right? So he says, no, he's a West End guy, was done for murder, right? And then he got in trouble while he's incarcerated, which is why we're serving him more paperwork. And
so was he
so
in the community then? Was he on?
No, he was in the East detention, so he's still incarcerated.
Okay.
So he had done some bad stuff while he was in the East, and so he had to get some paperwork served for this. So it was an assault or something like that, and it might even been another murder for all I know. But I just can't recall what that. It was something serious, anyways, that we had to take paperwork to serve him with. There's one of those things we're just going to serve him paperwork, and then we're gone. That's all it was going to be, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going my old man memory here. I think it was something to do with the OPP land, as a matter of fact. I think he was in the East for something, and so we were serving paperwork on behalf of the OPP. I think it was. I think so. It was. Anyways, I saw him. He clearly didn't recognize who it was, and I said, "You don't know my my name." We wear name tags, obviously, in Toronto here. We didn't back then, but he looked at my name and he was like, kind of like, "Oh, wait a second. Do you have a brother that works in Peel?" And I go, no, I'm the guy from Peel. It's me. And we'd thrown on, I was in the major crime unit at the time, but we had thrown a police jacket on so that, we're walking through the facility. So no one sees that we are police officers. And I had this like a spring jacket with my name tag on it. And he was like, gosh, he says, you look like, this fellow from Peel. And I said, no, it's me. And so at that moment in time, I was, what, there's really nothing to lose. I said, the other officer, he can stay if you want to, and he did, he ended up staying there. I said, I wouldn't mind just talking to you, just kind of like what we're doing right now. How has this changed your life? You know what I mean? Like you had gone from where you were, and I wanted to know the real story. Like, we all know the story that they said in court and so on and so forth. And, you've got your own words that you said, but there's nothing to be lost now. You don't have to talk to me if you don't want to, but I said, I think it would help, both of us. I said, I've always had questions as to kind of what really happened and stuff. And I got, as far as I can tell, he broke down. You could tell he'd been carrying this on his chest a long time. He's still young then, right? So he wasn't 30 yet. So
yeah, he would have been late 20s, probably.
Yeah, late 20s, right? So, but this whole thing changed his whole life, and this is not, a hardcore guy that grew up in the inner city. This is a good kid that got put into a bad situation. So, he was kind of, I guess, since then he's been spiraling down. And the thing that did it, I think, was the fact that I said, hey, you've got like a newborn baby now. You're going to be coming out at some point in time. You obviously don't want this for your child, right? And anyways, we had a good talk. It was a long talk. And basically it came out to the fact as to how much his life has so changed, from what he had when he was 16 years old, what he's going to think about. And that's an important message. It'd be great to be able to pass this type of thing on to other people. They do have shows now, I see today, obviously, where they do talk about old prisoners and what they've done. But that was a one that hit me home. You know what I mean? This was one where I was able to kind of say, hey, I was there, and see what change has come about with this guy, and how it's affected so many people, family wise, not just him, but other families that were involved in this, right? So
have you any idea what he's up to now, if he's still incarcerated or if he's turned his life around at all?
Yeah, I did I did have contact with him about a year after that, I guess. and it was not directly. It was just when I was in for the East for something else, and one of the guards was there and said, "Dad, that guy that you talked to, you were here like a year ago or so with, yeah, he was back again, and he said you're a good guy and type of thing or whatever." So it was just kind of funny that he would pass that on, right? So, but yeah, that was kind of an amazing moment to have, I guess, to be able to actually talk to someone that has had time to reflect and time to see the change that's happened to them, and see how awful it was. So yeah, that was great. I enjoyed my time there. So anyways, then let's see, I did that little stint in homicide, back to PRU again. Then I went to the detective office for a short time, and then ended up, and this again being the low person in the totem pole, this isn't because I'm amazing, but when I went into the detective office, they needed someone to go into the wiretap room for a project that was going on. Now, a lot of people didn't like to do that for obvious reasons, which I found out afterwards. It's 12-hour shifts. You're working basically, back in those days, you'd work usually 6 or 7 days. So you'd be basically working all the time. And you're really kind of, especially if you're on nights or something, it's like there's nothing going on, right? So at the same time, you got to be ready. So there could be one person in there, there could be 10 people in there, depending on what's going on. But you've got to be ready for something that's on the wiretaps. You've got to then contact whoever's out in the road. In this case here, it's a mobile support. So it was a live, thing that was going on. So they needed people to kind of be on their toes, as it were. And so that was, again, a fairly long time there. I was there for, I guess, a couple months, and it was, it's when you get into units, it's like they find something, and then, well, you're already here. You already know what's going on. We don't have to retrain someone, and you're expendable, as it were, because you're not important to be anywhere else. So you can stay here for a time. And I've been pretty blessed with that. You know what I mean? So it did lend me, then from there, I did a short stint into what they used to call the auto squad then. Again, just because I knew kind of the wiretap side of things. And they needed an extra body to kind of help out with what they were doing. So I did that for a time. And then again, always kind of seemed to go back to PRU again. Then I got working undercover there for a time in Peel before coming to Toronto. And just minor stuff like the typical that you do is drug buys here and there. And there was some kind of funny ones. There was one where it was a rent issue. I can't remember what it was now, all the details, but it's something to do with the fact that this person was not renting only to specific people. So I was apparently one of those people that he would rent to. So he wouldn't rent to other people because of, how they looked or whatever. So, it was such a funny one, to do an undercover operation for, but things like that. So, and then back to PRU, then I went to the use of force office. I'd applied for the use of force office through some friends that were in there already. And so
what is the use of force office? Like, I think the general public understands what use of force is, but might not realize that there's an actual office for it. So what were your responsibilities in there?
Kind of find that acronym is kind of funny, I find too, because people obviously get a sense of what is that. So it's a lot of in-service training for officers, but also recruits. So we teach firearms training, defensive tactics. When I was in there, there was simunition to come in, which is the fake rounds, if you will. They shoot like a chalk round, and cause like a powder on your when they hit you, type of thing. And those type of things. So
I suppose that's where, like, a lot of the, now anyway, I don't know how much of it was back then when you were in there, but where a lot of like the de-escalation training would happen. I remember doing something when I was a reporter, doing a story on the de-escalation. I think it was the same sort of thing.
Yeah, it's funny. They used to call it, I got to get the term now. This is really going back in my mind here. I know within the service, we called it verbal judo. But there was an actual, again, these come up with these acronyms are funny, but they had an actual term for it. And it wasn't like they call it now de-escalation. It was some silly term, but
Uh.
it seems like these people just come up with an idea. What do we call it? Let's call it the, the Wendy Weave or something. Okay, let's call it the Wendy Weave. My name is Wendy and we weave, right? So
Yes.
but so use of force is kind of like that too. Like we do teach, like it's really grown a lot. We are responsible for a lot of training for things too back in the day, which has just grown exponentially. So it goes from use of force paperwork, how to speak about things, how to talk about things in court, physically doing those things, handcuffing, dealing with the public, all those things is get into it. And, I like to talk a lot. So I know that people probably didn't appreciate, especially the in-service officers didn't really appreciate those days that they knew I was teaching a certain subject because I'd be talking for a little longer. I try to make it as fun as I can. And you know what, to be honest, I had a lot of grumpy Gus's come to me, and some guys would say to me, nope, that guy there, badge 1. No, he's grumpy forever. And then by the end of the day, he'd be coming over going, you know what, thanks a lot that you made that day good for me. So I know that I'm able to reach a lot of people that way. But and then the younger officers that are brand new that haven't done anything, they just suck everything up. So I tell war stories all the time. I know guys are rolling their eyes right now when they're watching this, but the young officers, they suck all that up. So they like to hear the stories and stuff like that. And
that's
of course,
so
they
funny.
try to keep humor involved, right? So
yeah. That reminds me of
it
reminds me of another TPS trust conversation I had with Inspector Hank Itzinga at the Homicide Squad. And him talking about how his daughter would be rolling her eyes as he's sharing another story driving through 14 Division. But now he's got a couple officers who he knows who are just started out and are in 14 Division. So I said, you can share your stories with them now and you'll have an engaged audience. Okay. So David, so clearly, I mean, what you've illustrated to us is like community policing to practice community policing. You don't need to be a community officer. That doesn't need to be your title. It's just a matter of engaging, having those conversations, building that trust. I want to talk a little bit about you now because this is all about showing the public that, you're a human being. You're more than what your uniform is, which you don't have on right now. But I want to talk about the pandemic because 2020, everybody's lives were sort of turned upside down. Yours was turned upside down. Your family's life was turned upside down for a different reason. Can you tell me what happened in 2020?
We switched to 12-hour shifts. So we went from the regular standard, we call it compressed work week, to 12-hour shifts. I started wearing these here for reading. And I, at that time, have, a 2-year-old toddler and an 8-year-old. And so I'm not getting sleep. I'm waking up tired. I'm having headaches. I'm attributing this to all these things, and I'm having trouble exercising. So the COVID time seemed to be a great time to get people trying to get back in shape again. And I was having trouble doing that. So I talked to the doctor about March. And of course, this is all virtual meetings. And I said to the doctor, I said, this is my issues. And so we're talking it out. And she's like, I can see her. She can see me. She goes, you do look tired, but she says, you got a toddler, you're working 12-hour shifts now, which is usually 14-hour shifts. You got glasses now. So, waking up with headaches and stuff, it can be a sign of something, but it's also a sign of what's going on in your life. So I want you to track your sleep and food and stuff. And we already knew I had diabetes. So I'm pretty good with my food and stuff as to tracking that type of thing. So I started doing that. And then fast forward, no, this was, I said March, it was May actually. And then a few weeks later, I'm at Sunnybrook working on night shift, and we brought a shooting victim into the hospital that night. And as fate would have it, because the doctors are strained, she ends up working, my doctor.
Your family doctor.
Working Emerge.
Wow.
Helping out at Sunnybrook. And she sees me and she does like a double take and almost a triple take. And she was like, comes over to me and she goes, did you just bring in this guy here, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. He's not going anywhere. I want you to get a CT scan. Like, that was her first words of her mouth. She goes, are you waking up with headaches still? And I go, yeah, because she said she saw me. she says my eyes were like, they're already kind of dark already normally, but they were just sunken in. But she says, when I looked at you, she goes, I could see that, like, I really felt that you were going to die. Like you had a death look about you. There
Wow.
was this kind of color, I guess, on you or whatever. And I've been working, I remember distinctly because I was like, I'd worked the night shift before, I'd worked like a 14-hour, 15-hour nights. And then here I am working the next night shift. And I still got 3 more to do, or 2 more to do.
Mm.
This was a Thursday night, I think it was. I'm not sure. Anyways, but I still have more night shift to finish. And she goes, no, the CT's not even, like, nothing's open right now, but I'm ordering a CT scan. We're going to get someone up there to do a CT scan. You can't get the results yet because no one's until 9, but you're done at 7 because I'm working 7 to 7.
Yeah.
But I want you to do that right away because this is something that's very important. This will tell me right then and there if there's anything to worry about. And so I said, what do you think? And she goes, I don't want to say, but she says, and she was very straight shooter with me. She goes, I'm going to have a concern that you may have a tumor. And she says, I can just see your eyes, the way you are. And as a result, it's maybe hard to see here, but
Yeah, I can see your
that's
scar.
that's the hairline scar I got there.
Wow.
So 1 minute and I think it was 26 seconds, I think it was, for the CT scan.
Wow.
And they couldn't read it then. The doctor did look at it. She secretly looked at it, but she didn't tell me. But she immediately called a neurosurgeon. Now this is COVID times, right? So I couldn't get in right away, but I was on my way home. I was actually almost home, and then she called me and she says, "I want you to come back." So so I got my wife. We drove back. I saw the neurosurgeon, in person, which again is a rare thing. And he told me afterwards. So this was on the Friday morning. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I got operated on Tuesday, but
Wow.
only because I had to do COVID protocols, which wasn't
Wow.
available till Sunday. So, but he had told me that afterwards that it's a fairly common brain tumor. It's a hemangioma, I think it's the right term, but it was near an artery. So if you take like this is, say, an artery in my brain and making it larger here, the tumor itself was kind of not encapsulating it, but it was at the point where it had kind of covered over 98% of it. So there is still 2 microscopic pieces that they couldn't take out. But he had said to me that if it was not COVID times, he was going to operate on me right then and there, because if he didn't go as soon as he did, he said you could have been 2 days later and it would have been like a brain aneurysm. Boom, you'd be gone.
Wow.
So thankfully that did happen. He didn't tell me anything about that. He just says we got to operate as soon as we can, which was Tuesday morning. So here we are Saturday, getting our funeral plots, getting the will changed, all these things we had to get done, right? These are things that had to be done just in case. And
you got 2 little kids at home.
Yeah. So here, part of me kind of felt sorry for myself a little bit, because all my life I've been with kids, coaching them and having fun. Now later in life, I've got, met my wife and we've got 2 amazing children, and both of us were later in life for us. So, it was a great blessing for us. And I was thinking, man, this is going to be taken away, kind of in a way taken from me, but more taken from them.
Yeah.
So we were running videos. We were camping in the living room, stuff like that, right? Just to make it fun for our time here. And then take a minute here.
It's okay. Of course, take as much time as you need, or we can stop altogether if you like.
Nope. So I got the operation, which obviously was a success. My kind of feeling sore for me for a little bit was pretty quick, which I was happy about, because a lot of people are like, oh my God, that's awful news. But you know what, it turned to be good news, because I got past all this and here I am years later, a couple years later now, that it's all been going good. I did have a couple of really bad seizures afterwards. One of them was really bad. It was a few hours after my operation. The neurosurgeon told me when I was going in, when they had me down, like thing, they strapped me down and everything, and which I thought was kind of funny. And We had a few jokes about that, but there was several doctors and computer banks all around, everywhere. And he was telling me that long gone are the days where I'm in there doing something. He says I'm on a keyboard or a mouse or whatever, and they're doing it that way, right? So
Really? Like a robot?
yeah, so yes, so
Wow.
because it's so microscopic, right? So it's so
Yeah.
close. But he told me before I went in, he said that that's when he told me, I'm glad we're doing it now. And he told me then and there, he says, I'm just letting you know now that if this, I told you before, how bad it was, that we would have done this last Friday. But he said there will be, there's seizures every time after. I don't know how bad or they're going to be. He said, what we've got to do is pretty invasive. So he said, you will survive the operation. He said, I'm letting you know now that you will survive the operation. And they were amazing. They got my wife and kids snuck in with me when they're not supposed to, right? So but he said it's the seizures afterwards that you've got to be worried about. And it was true because I it's a bit of a haze, but I remember doctors and nurses talking to me. They'd taken me out of the room that I was in because I did see my wife and kids. I was glad to see them. And then I was down into like emerged somewhere, and the doctor had recognized me, not me personally, but he knew, that I was a police officer. And, he was saying something to the effect that you've got to, it's up to you, Dave. I can't do anything else here, right? Like I can't do anything else to help you. There's a lot of people that, don't make it. And they're people that you bring in. In other words, you're a good guy. So it's up to you to pull yourself through. And I remember it's kind of like a stroke thing. Like I was trying to raise my right arm. You raise your right arm and I'd raise your left. I couldn't raise it. Stuff like that. It was, can you sit up for me a bit? And it, put my head up, and it was all these things like that I wasn't able to do. And
this
then
was
he said,
this was after your surgery?
so this is about 5 hours later.
When
It
you
was an
had your
8-hour
seizure.
surgery, and it was my first seizure I had.
Right.
And yeah, so he was like, you've got to pull out of this. It's up to you now. I've done everything I can. I guess they put some drugs in me, I guess. I don't think it's what do you call that, where they hit you with the big needle or whatever, adrenaline. I don't think it was that, but they do have something they put in there to help clear your way through. And he said, there's nothing else I can do, so it's up to you now. So that kind of brought me to to kind of bear a bit more. So I did come out of it, obviously. There is still 2 microscopic pieces that are still there, and they're inoperable. But like the doctor said, every 6 months, actually this Thursday, I've got another MRI to go to. It's every 6 months I get an MRI for the first 5 years. And then after that, I go for once a year, as long as it hasn't changed, right? So it's been a couple of years now, nothing's changed. And it's an interesting because my grandmother lived to be 97. And unknowing this, she had the same tumor in the front left lobe.
Really?
It's carried by the female side, and it's passed down a second generation, like twins are. You know how twins usually jump a generation? So for us, my mom carried it, obviously from her mom, and then it was to me. So we immediately got my niece and my sister both got tested. Oh, hold on a sec here. I got a notification here. So we immediately got the that changed, tested, and they're fine. But now it's just something that's we monitor. So
well, it's good that you don't need to worry about passing it to your kids because it stops with you, right?
Yes. And the other thing is too is that it's such a microscopic. They figured the tumor was decades old in me. From my grandma was 60-something years old. They figured it had calcified on the top, right? Calcification means it's been there so long it hasn't. But mine, it had cracked open a bit because it was starting to get fed off by the artery. So it had kind of started to break. But it's never gonna. By the time I pass on, if I live to be 150, it still will be probably microscopic still, right?
I hope so.
So that's the good news, right? So it's all good, like
and there's other good news, and we're looking at it because I know that the stuff that is on the shelf behind you, at least some of it,
Mm.
you've made, right? And it was because your doctor said that she or he wanted you to be concentrating on some new hobby task, like kind of
Yep.
exercise your brain. Is that right? So what did you get into?
Yes, you're exactly right. So YouTube is my friend, and it's actually, I was going to show you here. I did bring this to the side. So this started out with my first costume, as it were, if you will. This is made by a friend of mine. This is it's a gauntlet for Witch King,
Oh,
or
wow.
for Nazgul, if you
Wow.
will, for the geek world that know who that is. Now this looks
Yeah.
metal, right? But it's not. It's plastic. Okay. He does
Wow.
make metal ones, but this is the plastic version,
Mm-hmm.
and it's nice and light and easy to carry around. So um, from that, I had a friend I borrowed a laser cutter from. This is another set I'm making. So there's these here, which is the plastic pieces
Uh-huh.
that is, my buddy has a laser cutter, so it cuts them to size and everything what you want.
Very
It does all
cool.
the hard work for me. And then I made this one here, which isn't as good as his,
It looks
but
the same to me.
no, it's not quite. So
It looks like metal.
I know it does. I will say that there's his in the bottom, and mine in the top here. So
That is so
it's
cool.
but it's been a lot of fun. So I started off with that, and then yeah, you can see what I've got up here. Besides my signed basketballs, there I've got some Mandalorian
Mandalorian.
helmets.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the bottom one, a buddy of mine helped me out with a lot of heavy lifting.
Uh-huh.
My son wanted that one in particular with the horns and the golden and blue. The
Mm-hmm.
top two are ones that I had done. They're 3D printed. So I've got another one right
Okay.
here that is not done. This is just off of a printer,
Yeah.
and you can see it's got lines in it and stuff.
Yeah.
So then you got to do all this work to sand it down and stuff. And so here's a piece of leg armor which gets rid of the line. It's like body work
Yeah.
for a car.
Yeah.
So you sand it down, you fill in Bondo and stuff like
Uh-huh.
that. So that is what brought me to making Mandalorian costumes.
I
So
like, I mean, I know you've been for a long time, right? You've been into like collectibles, pop culture type
yeah,
stuff.
but not this.
But could you have ever imagined like 3 years ago if somebody said you'd be making Mandalorian costumes? Could you have imagined that?
Not ever. Not ever. It looked like it's something that I never would have imagined. I had my honey-do list when I was recovering,
Mm-hmm.
and thankfully I can tell all the guys out there that I pretty well got a lot of that done. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the only part that didn't get done was selling off some of my goodies, but I'm working on that now.
Oh,
Um,
you're selling off some stuff.
a lot of
That's
stuff,
interesting.
yeah. It's
Oh,
just stuff,
really?
right? So
Yeah.
so I'm keeping some of my favorites, but I'm definitely paring down a lot. But this has started taking up room too, right? So
Yeah,
I've
no
got
kidding.
costumes. I made some Minecraft helmets for some those square heads for
Yes.
costumes for kids in the neighborhood, and
Oh yeah.
I've
Your
done
kids must, this is another thing that your kids must just be loving. Maybe you're trying to ease them from their love of basketball coaching into their love of making like cosplay type stuff.
of dressing up in cosplay. My
Yeah.
my daughter definitely embraces it a lot. She has her own pink Mandalorian, which I made.
Yeah.
She picked the colors out. Hers is as cute as anything, and of course she had a princess dress.
Yes, of
So
course.
I put that on her. And then my son had a play last year, so I took it upon myself to help out. So I made some knight outfits and some princess crowns, and I did a big dragon costume for my son with big wings and
Wow.
stuff. And so yeah, so it's been, you know what, I can say by no means a veteran, but I can watch YouTube like anyone else can and learn. And it just takes trial and error. You're making mistakes all the time, but
Yeah.
it's a new challenge and it's a fun challenge. My daughter, my son to an extent as well, but he's getting at that awkward age. He wants to be online all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But my daughter definitely helps me out. He used to help me out a lot, but she helps
Mm.
me out quite a bit. He does still, excuse me, he still does help me, but
Mm-hmm.
he definitely loves the attention. Like we go to
Mm.
school and he's dressed up, and all his buddies, think, wow, it's so cool, right? So,
David, you said
so it's a
that
lot of fun.
you commented that you and your wife ended up having kids late in life, that you're lucky to be able to have kids later in life because you didn't have the chance earlier. And even though you're like 33 years into policing, just doing some math, because you said 30 years ago you were doing that. So you got to be like 53 years old, something like that. Or
56, yeah.
56. No, 56. Right, right. You're a cool dad. You're a cool dad. Good for you.
I'm going to strive to be a cool dad as much as I can. So
Good for
yeah,
you.
absolutely.
Well, David, is there anything else that you want people to know about you, about policing, about police officers in general before we end this conversation?
I don't think so. I think the career's always been good to me. I've always enjoyed it. I think it's what you make of it is also it too. There's a lot of negativity and bitterness, but you've got to get past that. And one of the ways is to don't immerse yourself as a young officer. Don't immerse yourself in only police world. You know what I mean? Like so many people do, and we all do it to an extent. But I've been very happy and blessed that having come from a small town outside Stratford, it's I have all those old friends that are still there, and they keep me grounded. I've kept in contact with them. I've got a friend that lives in Germany, another friend that lives in Italy, another friend in Spain, and I'm so lucky in the fact that they travel back here at least once a year. So I'll see them all the time. So even though they've been gone, one buddy of mine there, he's been in Germany now for 29 years, I think now.
Wow.
He might even be 30. No, he's 30 years now. And except for COVID, he's come back every year and we see him. So it's like, I got people that I don't go to Niagara Falls every year, and yet I'll see him every year, kind of thing. Right. So, so it's important for everybody to keep yourself grounded, have extra stuff outside of the world, of policing to live with. Family does change things. I'm lucky too. And I see a lot of officers like this too, that if I was younger and I was, trying to do what I did in the past, it would be a very hard balance. I'm happy now with the kids now because I have all the time. I'm behind a desk. I'm working Monday to Friday. I'm there for school for them all the time, except for the morning. But the evenings and all the school events they got to do, I'm there all the time. So and I love it. Right, I embrace it. So I can bring them along with me to my basketball and stuff. And now they're doing basketball themselves. So my daughter wants to do ice hockey now, she says. So we'll see.
Maybe you'll be making her uniform.
We have to skate first.
Maybe you'll be making her uniform.
Yeah, you never know, right?
You probably can, or her gear anyway, to keep her safe. Get out the 3D printer.
But I've enjoyed my time. I've enjoyed my time. I really have. And every job has their ups and downs and stuff. And to be able to affect people as directly as we do, I think it's important to keep yourself grounded, and it's important to kind of realize other side of the perspective of other people, right?
It's all about having those conversations.
It is talking and talking, like I love to do.
Well, David, okay. So on that note, it has been a pleasure talking to you. I so appreciate you taking the time and allowing us to get to know you a little bit. As I said earlier, probably most people have never seen your face in this context before. So I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. All the best.
All the best.
Bye-bye.